Good afternoon to one and all present here. This is Bhagilakshmi, an intern of AMO TNSB. I kindly invite each and every one of you here to attend this webinar, a roadmap from student to corporate professionals by AMO. All India Manufacturers Organization founded by Sir Vishweswaraya in 1941. AMO has more than 80 years of successful track record as Chamber of Commerce. AMO used to conduct various educative programs for all industries month on month to our members as well as non-members. In this connection, today we AMO going to conduct the educative awareness program for students because a famous quote says, "Today a reader, tomorrow a leader." Hence, it clearly shows that AMO is not only cater into just MNCs but also for service sectors, individual business owners, and educational institutions. We have lot of prominent institutions as our members. We jointly conduct mega event with India's premier institution, Anna University, called Techno 2022. Stay tuned for the date. To become a prestigious member for AMO-TNSB, kindly log in to our website www.amotnsb.com, download membership form and fill it up and send it to us. As Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam's famous quote, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Yes, to change the world, students need roadmap to execute their talent. Today, we have Mr. V.V. Naresh sir, the prominent speaker, motivational speaker, Sir Vice President, Company Secretary, and Compliance Officer of Intellect Design Arena Limited to speak about a roadmap from students to corporate professionals. Our company deemed to felicitate moment of appreciation to our resource person.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Let's welcome our speaker to take over this memorable webinar.
Thank you, Bhagilakshmi. Thanks a lot for the introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. In fact, it gives me a privilege to speak before an august audience comprising of students as well as many from the industry fraternity. In fact, like wherein I love speaking on topics like these. In fact, the one which has been given to me, and the thing is like wherein first of all, let me admit that in fact I was not speaking in any forum say till last 5 years or so, only from 2014 onwards or so. In fact, like wherein in fact one of my fellow members in the Institute of Company Secretaries of India gave me that this one like wherein why Naresh, why are you like this? In fact, why not you come into the open and then start speaking. In fact, like and that is how this in fact like that this transformation has taken place from what I was prior to 2013-14 and what I am today. And I'm indeed honored, in fact, like when Jevita ma'am, in fact, called me and then said that I need to address, in fact, last week, in fact, and thanks a lot, ma'am, in fact, for this. And let this not be a monologue like wherein I keep on talking for about 45 minutes and so on. I need participation from you also, like wherein I know in fact in today's technology we may not meet in fact directly, in fact physically at one place, and now this technology has given us wherein in fact I am addressing this from my office, in fact at Civil City, and then you people are in fact like before your systems, computer systems like laptops and so on, to watch this. In fact, before I go into sharing my presentation, like wherein in fact, how in fact like you also would like to know. In fact, like I have been in fact, I'm Chennai, I'm a Chennaiite. I have been in Chennai. In fact, by the last say I could say 50 years. In fact, like 50 years is too long a time, and I love, in fact, like love, in fact, by being part of Chennai and so on. It's not that, in fact, I have not gone to any other place and so on, but then my school education, my college education, and everything, in fact, like between has been out of Chennai only. In fact, so yeah, in fact, today's topic, like to start with, the this one from the roadmap from being a student to a corporate professional. Yeah, in fact, I have gone through that, but then those times were totally different from what we are today. Like where yes, technology has given us quite a lot. Like wherein let me just share a few things before we get into what is exactly like my presentation and things like. And meanwhile, you can stop me, you can ask me your queries. In fact, as we move on, yeah, in fact, I studied in Mandavali only in Chennai. In fact, I was a student of St. John's Senior Secondary School. Then, in fact, I was a student of Raja Mutaya Senior Higher Secondary School, Arepuram, and then I'm a student of New College, Rayapeta. Like these were all in the 80s, and then I completed my graduation way back in 86. At that time, if you had asked me, in fact, what would be my roadmap, from being a student, in fact, to, in fact, becoming a corporate professional, in fact, like my answer would have been the same as you people, in fact, who answer now, but then maybe that answer might differ. I really don't know. In fact, it's my this one, yeah, things have changed, but I am observing this. In fact, in the case of my daughter, in fact, wherein, in fact, when she was doing her 10th and so on, she didn't come to me asking for which is the group that she needs to take, getting into the plus one, and then subsequent to that, in fact, the college education and so on, because the present generation, in fact, they take their own calls. It is not like wherein, in fact, those days, when father is a doctor or father is a engineer, in fact, the son or the daughter needs to become a doctor or engineer. Nowadays, in fact, students have their own ambitions, they have their own way of taking, calls, with respect to their career. Okay, let us cut that short, wherein, yeah, you might ask me, in fact, wherein, it might surprise you. In fact, having given my profile, wherein, I was a student of BSc Mathematics of New College, and then suddenly you are finding me, in fact, having done company secretaries, and then, today I'm a fellow member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. Yeah, things do change. In fact, I am also surprised, what had happened, in fact, in 80s, and then what is happening today. Okay, fine. Let us start with the career of a student, wherein, in fact, nobody has got a roadmap when they are studying in their classes 8, 9, and 10. And then where it starts, wherein, when you are about to enter your plus one. In fact, I don't know, in fact, how we are participating students here, I presume that they are all doing their college education and so on. And wherein, you start taking a call, when, in fact, you are about to complete your 10th examination and then getting into your plus one. That is where, in fact, you take your call with respect to what is that you are going to become. In fact, in future, in fact, drawing a roadmap, wherein, I am going to become a doctor. In fact, I am going to take science group. In fact, or I am going to become an engineer, and I am going to become an MBA in marketing, or MBA, in fact, management business studies, in fact, administration, in fact, whatnot. In fact, at that time, let me admit, age is no bar. In fact, wherein, you can have education in the present day circumstances, even, in fact, at the age of 60, 70, and so on. But if, in fact, I can recollect, in fact, way back about 20, 25 years back, in fact, there was a news, in fact, in fact, I don't know from which place, wherein, somebody by, in fact, I don't remember the name, at the age of 72 had become a cost accountant. In fact, I presume the audience would know, in fact, there are three professional courses, in fact, with respect to the accountancy part of it, wherein we call it as CA, that is a chartered accountancy course. And then the other one, which has undergone a change, where we were earlier calling it as ICWA, and then now it's become ICMA, where we call it as once you qualify or once you pass out to the final, it's called they are called cost accountants. And then the third one, which I am, in fact, presently, in fact, where, that is why that's what makes me to be the company secretary of a listed company, Intellect Design Arena Limited. So that gentleman, in fact, at the age of 72, had become a cost accountant. And many, in fact, in the this one media and things and so on, and in the circles also, study circles and all. What is this gentleman going to do, having completed cost accountancy at the age of 72? In fact, is he going to come back into employment, or is it that, what is he going to do? But then we need to appreciate that, at that age, he had this one, the motivation to do a course, a professional course, a cost accountancy, and then passing that out. Okay, just getting back to the plus one part of it. In fact, you are a student. you are a student wherein you take calls like which of the groups you want to take, and in fact in fact what all is available in fact in the present day, this one like wherein those combinations which we had also nowadays. In fact, like if you want to do pure engineering and things like that, in fact you take up the course which is called the MPC, and then you have another subject like in a computer, this one paper on that. And if you want to be a doctor, in fact you want to do medicine, like wherein minus mathematics, and then you get into the biology comprising of this one like botany and zoology and so on. And then the commerce group, wherein with mathematics or without mathematics, in fact you can take history, in fact in the absence of mathematics. Nowadays, in fact, CBSE pattern gives you that marketing paper in fact in a commerce group. In fact, there are various options now available, like not like earlier, say about 20 years back or 30 years back, wherein you had a fixed decision of what needs to be done. And okay, the curriculum also undergoes a change with the changing circumstances and so on. And now education is all about like wherein there are changes, and then like we need to get used to those changes. Now, in fact, like, just give me some time. Let me just get into. I have done about 14, 15 slides, like wherein it is going to be a PowerPoint presentation. Just give me about a minute or so, to share my presentation. See, this is all whatever. In fact, I had done. In fact, like based on my this one. Just give me a minute. In fact, like I'm just getting into the. Bhagya, are you able to see my file? Like because this again, I'm doing it from my office.
No, sir.
1 minute. In fact, like I had.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now we go.
Yeah, in fact, like sorry about that, and like wherein I'm sorry. In fact, I had a change of my system. In fact, only last. Yeah, just to continue on that, like wherein see, when you say that what is the roadmap to a corporate professional, like wherein uh, who is a professional. In fact, let's first define like wherein see, let me give you that like wherein when I had done my graduation, like wherein see, many people do talk about like what is that you want to become, like I would say that I want to become an engineer having taken a science group, or in fact like I would become a doctor and so on. And then there are various other courses, like I the disclaimer is I don't say support anything like wherein in fact like wherein everything, every course is in fact like is has its own charm and beauty, and I don't vouch for like wherein this is this one which you will have to do and so on. But then what is that difference that makes a difference from an ordinary person to a corporate professional, like where when you are a student and then when you want to aim high, in fact like in your career, and then you want to become a professional, like wherein A professional means like who earns their living from performing any activity that requires a certain level of education, skill, or training. In fact, all the three are very in education, and it has got a specific skill and a training. There is typically a required standard of competency, knowledge, or education that must be demonstrated to the highest quality. They are required to adhere to certain code of conduct and other ethical standards. The main difference between an employee and a professional is that domain knowledge is not a prerequisite for an employee, but a professional, it becomes mandatory. So here, in fact, where the journey begins. In fact, the ultimate goal of any educational program is to aid students, in shaping their career and to perform well in the corporate world. The students are required to practice domain skill set and competency in order to encounter the challenges in their chosen path of their career. See, let me just, in fact, I can only talk about my this one, what was, in fact, when I took the science group, wherein, yes, I wanted to become an engineer. It's not that, in fact, I couldn't become an engineer. In fact, circumstances, in fact, dictate the path. And, in fact, I did BSc mathematics, in fact, in a college, in fact, I said in Royapeta. And, subsequent to that, I was just thinking, what is that? It's going to be. In fact, let's stop with doing this graduation, or let me just become a professional. In fact, and that too in a corporate professional. So there, in fact, I gave thoughts what is that I need to do from becoming a professional in the corporate world. And that is where yeah, you need to have mentors. In fact, I consulted many, in fact, and when you go to the many, in fact, of your friends, wherein what they do is they give you various options, you could have done this, you could have done that, and so on. But at the end of the day, it is your this one, because you are only going to become, in fact, in your career. And somebody cannot become the other. In fact, each one has got their own strengths, and each one can be their, it can be their own weakness also. So can be a general counsel, can be a software engineer. There was a time, in fact, in the 90s and in 2000. Nabandra, yeah, in fact, he's doing his computer engineering. In fact, he wants to become an IT professional. Yeah, I work for an IT company. In fact, MBA graduate from a B school. Yeah, in fact, I am. In fact, and then what is he doing? In fact, he's doing a CA course, Chartered Accountancy. In fact, I did my company secretary, cost accountants, and so on and so forth. But the thing is, wherein, when you are taking a call, wherein, what is that I am going to do? In fact, wherein, that only determines. But what happens is, wherein, when you get into an engineering, and as I said, I have nothing against any course, wherein, it is well within this 4 years or 5 years, wherein, I don't know whether I write my exams, in fact, in the first 6 months, 1 year, and so on and so forth. What happens is, wherein, within that 5 years, yes, I come out. In fact, I am an engineer, or I am a doctor, and so on. But then there are certain this one, wherein, for example, in fact, I do a CA course, I do a cost accountancy course, I do a company secretary course, and so on. Many people do ask what is the timelines within which, in fact, I can complete. And whenever I do this career counseling in my institute, wherein, I'm a member of the placement committee. And then whenever I go to schools and all, wherein they ask me to address students, of plus two and plus one and plus two students, wherein, what is that timeline within which I can complete, or what is that salary first thing I'll get, wherein, once completing this. There are no shortcuts to success. At the end of the day, in fact, wherein, pursuing a requisite course and obtaining professional is a key for any profession. And in fact, that is the first step. Here, let me just step back. In fact, it's not that I am talking about my daughter and so on. In fact, she did her 10th and she did her plus two. In fact, in a CBSE school only in Adayar, wherein, when she was about to write her 10th exam, she didn't come to me. Her school said, no, 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 you are taking only science group. In fact, you'll have to do only science group. She said, no, I am going to take commerce group, and that too without mathematics. In fact, this is what I am quoting it from my real life experience, wherein, I didn't say anything. She got it done, and so on. And then she entered her plus one and plus two. And Many of them, in fact, like, when I addressed some team also last week, in fact, when I did this, many of them are not aware, like, wherein, to become an engineer, in fact, like, what is the minimum age. In fact, like, everybody will say that 17 I pass out my plus 2, 4 years, 21 I become an BE or a BTech and so on. Medicine I become MBBS. In fact, like, I get that degree maybe 21, 22, and so on and so forth. But here, in fact, like, earlier, all the three institutes with, which I'm referring to, like, wherein the CA or the CMA or the CS, like, wherein, what they said is, like, wherein, you need to be a graduate first. Then, in fact, like, you'll have to do a 3 year articles, that is 23 in the case of a CA, like, wherein, even in the case of a CMA, or as, once passing out to BCom or any other this one, like, wherein, any other graduation other than fine arts, you can directly enter the profession. But then, if you pass out exams, everything in the first attempt, then you are a chartered or you are a company secretary or a cost in at the age of 23. So between the two, in fact, like, everybody used to feel like, I will become an engineer by the age of 21. If I'm not doing a post graduation, in fact, I am a engineering graduate by the age of 21. So at that point of time, in fact, in India, mainly, in fact, I could see when I'm talking about Chennai, like, wherein, 1984 was the first time when CA Institute introduced this entrance exam concept. And there was a heavy rush, in fact, for the evening college. In fact, i- if I remember, if my memory serves me right, like, wherein, Vivekananda College, that was a college first, in fact, which was offering evening course. Why, you may ask me the reason, like, wherein, what was happening is, when you join CA, you are compulsorily, you will have to do articles, and that articles is the working hours. So you will not be able to attend the commerce or the science, whatever is the graduation, like, wherein at that point of time, wherein you have to get through the entrance, which was introduced by the CA Institute first in 1984, wherein one needs to write that entrance examination, and if they pass out, they can join directly the practicing chartered accountant for their articles and so on. And then one could complete their graduation as well as the CA at the age of 20. And I remember my friends having completed the age of 20, wherein they had to wait to get the membership. I know, in fact, all of them must be knowing. Everybody, in fact, against their name, in fact, like, no, after their name, they use this descriptive letters like ACA, ACMA, or ACS, or FCA, FCS, and so on. Those are descriptive letters which denotes that you are a member of that particular institute. And then institutes were, specifying the minimum age limit within which, in fact, like, you could apply for membership and so on. Those are all old. This one, like, I was talking about the 84, 85, those years and so on. Now coming back into the present curriculum, in fact, as I said, there is something called like a provisional registration and so on with all the three institutes, wherein if you are about to write your plus 2 exam. In fact, why I am saying this, because your corporate journey can start as early as 21, 20, and so on. In fact, like, if you want to become a corporate professional, like, wherein, the age also matters and so on. And yeah, in fact, like, wherein if you are an engineer, in fact, many of them wants to do a post graduation, either an MTech or an ME and so on, or they get into an MBA stream and so on. Yeah, by the time, in fact, you are almost 23, you get into that course. Here also, like, wherein, what my this one is, like, where, all the three institutes now have that provisional registration also they have. And which is that many of the students aren't aware, like, wherein, I am going to approach, today we are in February, I am going to approach writing the exam in May or April. In fact, it all depends, like, wherein I'm just, let us not talk about situation during this COVID times. The normal times, in fact, the plus 2 examination are somewhere in March or in April. In fact, it depends, in fact, on India basis, India basis, each board has got it. But then anyhow, by April, you complete your exam, and by the time you get your results is almost June. When just getting back into that exam, professional exams, in fact, now Institute of Company Secretaries had made a change only with respect to last year. Earlier, they had their examination called foundation or entrance or preliminary, whatever nomenclature you can give to the exams, like, wherein, they were wherein, conducting exams, in fact, like, wherein, in May, June, or December. Like, you have exams are conducted twice a year. And what was happening is this provisional registration, you need not even pass plus two. You are about to write plus two, you can get into that institute registration by doing a provisional registration. And then once completing plus two, and then you are getting your plus two mark sheet, you can go and attach that online, and then you can write your exam by December. And the only change that has undergone in the Institute of Complicities of India is they have now introduced an examination called CSET, which is being conducted once in 2 months. And earlier, only chartered accountants, cost accountants were exempt from writing that CSET. Otherwise, in fact, you will have to complete your graduation and then get into that. Amendment has also come through last August, if I remember. Like, yes, wherein BCom students of other graduate courses also, like wherein they are exempted, in fact, like from writing this CSET, and then they can directly get into the executive stage. In fact, like only the nomenclature has undergone a change with respect to the various institutes, like wherein like an intermediate, or in fact it is called a final. Now, as far as CS institute goes, they are calling it as executive and then professional. So you save what, almost 3 years, in fact, like wherein yeah, my daughter, in fact, she wrote it when she was doing her plus two. She wrote it in the coming December. That was December 2019. Then you'll have to give a 9 months gap to write your executive or intermediate. Then you'll have to give another 9 months gap. In fact, like why I'm saying this so is you are cutting short, and now she is in her final year of graduation, BCom, and then by the time she passes out her graduation, she can write all the groups of professional, final three groups, and if she passes in the first attempt, she will be a commerce graduate as well as a qualified company secretary. In fact, at the age of 20. Only thing why I had to quote this is because, in fact, like in real this one, like I'm not speaking about others, like wherein I can only quote from whatever has happened in the recent times, and that too in the case of my daughter. Otherwise, nothing. In fact, like to quote out of my this one, like it's just to give you that reality. In fact, I had to quote my daughter's this one, like then from a student stage wherein you are going to get transformed into a professional or professional curriculum, or enhancing their standard of their course material in order to be on par with the international standards. A student accomplishing all the stages of a professional course is indeed to have traveled a thorny path. In fact, like one must understand the core subject of a professional course. For instance, for a chartered accountant, income tax and accounts are the nerve blood wise. For a cost accountant, the core subject is cost accounting and corporate accounting and so on. So thus choosing either of the course must be fully and nuances of the core subject. Once the doors of the corporate life and successful professional is application of knowledge, workplace, this steers to move forward and so on. In fact, like we are able to see that on the screen, maybe that I don't have read that entire sentence, like wherein yeah, now in fact, like what happens is wherein you will have to decide on which of the courses you are planning to take. And then any questions up to this stage, because in fact I have been speaking for the last 15-20 minutes, any question here, in fact, like I'm ready to answer that. Otherwise, we can move on. Bhagya, any questions, in fact, like during the course of the session? In fact, I'm ready to answer. Presuming that there are no queries, in fact, I am moving on. In fact, like how do you adopt your professionalism, like wherein what is a professional, like what distinguishes a professional from others, like wherein the conduct, aims, or qualities that characterize or mark a professional. A professional person is professionalism. The key elements on the job professionalism are: work smarter, not harder; to have expert knowledge, networking, be organized, to create reliability, to be accountable, and willingness to take charge. Yeah, Bhagya, in fact, like any queries, in fact, like I'm ready to stop here. In fact, like
Yeah, sure, sir.
so any questions from participants, in fact, like otherwise I can move on.
So last 15 minutes we'll have that session, sir.
Absolutely, absolutely fine. In fact, I'm okay with that. many in fact, like wherein it is not that one needs to know, in fact, what is Companies Act or the sections of the Companies Act, and so on and so forth. But then to just to give an idea, like wherein why I chose, in fact, like way back in '87, like, that I wanted to become a company secretary and so on. I will give my this one, and then it's wide open. In fact, today, like wherein anybody can choose any this one. Like, it's the ambition. It is that aim. In fact, what is that you are going to become, like wherein that only it dictates. But then way back in '87, nobody knew. Yeah, even today, let me tell you. In fact, like a vast this one. In fact, if you go and say somebody, in fact, like many do ask me a question. What is that you are doing? Instead, I said I am company secretary in fact of the company. You mean to say you are secretary to MD? That is the first question which comes, in fact, like from many of them. No, but then it's in the lighter vein. In fact, like wherein now, in fact, many have come to know like what are these three courses. But then CA is something, in fact, many of them are aware, like where chartered accountancy and so on. But the first this one which many rise is ஐயோ அது ரொம்ப முக்கிய இது கஷ்டமான course. It is a very difficult course. It is not like wherein I enter a college and then I write my exams and then I come out and then I pass out. In fact, it is not like that. And but then, but what to do? In fact, like it's very this one. There is no time frame within which, in fact, one can complete, and so on and so forth. These are all questions like wherein you can ask me at the end. In fact, like many of them do ask me. In fact, like wherein what is the time frame within which I can complete? In fact, like a professional course, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. I know of many like wherein they have taken nearly 10 to 12 years, in fact, to complete their courses and so on. But then here, let me just give you like wherein, for about 57 years, in fact, many of them would have heard Companies Act 1956, 1956, 1956, and so on. And it could withstand the test of time for nearly 57 years. But it was written way back in fact, like 55, 56, and then it was brought it as an act since 1956 onwards. But then, in fact, like it's a short this one, like wherein what had happened is on 27th of March 2014, suddenly, in fact, like with the bill to be passed as an act, in fact, it has to go through both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. The then corporate affairs minister, Mr. Sachin Pilot, in fact, on 27th of March 2014, in fact, like announced that within 3 days or 4 days from 1st of April 2014, this act is going to come into effect, like wherein replacing the Companies Act 1956. We as professionals, we were just wondering as to what is this. We have written all our exams, in fact, like and we have passed out based on the old Companies Act. How are we going to get accustomed with the new Companies Act, with the change of whatever forms we need to file with ROC and so on, register of companies and so on? How is that we are going to do? And then at the starting stage itself, like wherein you need to have that in your mind whether you are going to become a practicing professional or a corporate professional. And here, in fact, we have been discussing about becoming a corporate professional. So just to give you a bit of this one, like introduction of the Companies Act 2013 with effect from 1st of April 2014, the powers of the company secretary has increased manifold. Today I take pride that in fact I have done a course like wherein I am being respected and so on. I'll just give you what is that I do and so on, wherein you can also appreciate that, like recognized. They introduced one term, in fact, under the Companies Act called as KMP. What is KMP? It is there on your screen, calling it as key managerial personnel of the organization. And when we do our curriculum, like wherein we are exposed to all kinds of acts that are there. In fact, like in the books, like wherein many would know, like wherein for PF we have the EPF Act. For ESI, we have that ESI, this one, like Employee Statement. Whether it is Factories Act, whether it is this act, any act you name, in fact, like Societies Registration Act or Registration Act, or this one, like Securities Contract Regulation Act, whatnot, in fact, FEMA, and so on. Many acts, in fact, like all those acts is what, in fact, we read it as part of the curriculum, because when we become a member and when we enter a corporate world, like wherein We need to do so many things, in fact, like wherein, and then at the end of the day, a company secretary becomes the compliance officer. And you know what is the term compliance means, like wherein, till 2013 or 2014, nobody, in fact, everybody used to talk about that governance, corporate governance, or compliance with various laws, regulatory compliance, and so on. But then this has gained momentum in the last 7 8 years, like wherein, in a listed company, or even in the case of a closely held company. I know, in fact, like, many of them would be aware as the different kind of companies. Let me just give you a short this one: a private limited company wherein two or more, in fact, like in a wife and a husband or brother or sisters, they can form a company as a private limited company. Then it's called a family concern, wherein you call it as a closely held public limited company, wherein, the father, the parents, the son, daughters, and all, they form a company. And then in 2008, one more came, like where, LLPs. In fact, you should have heard limited liability partnerships and so on. And then the finally is the one, in fact, like, the listed company wherein the shares get listed on the stock exchanges and so on. So nowadays, in fact, the act demands that it is mandatory for companies having some threshold limits as paid up share capital to have a mandate full-time company secretary, as a key managerial personnel for listed companies and so on. Wide scope in employment as well as in practicing area. In fact, why to choose? In fact, I have given you the reasons, like wherein, these are the ones, like, professionally rendering services in many areas like CG, financial market services, advisor, representation survey, valuation, and so on. Creating your own opportunity, in fact, like wherein, see, if you ask me what is that you do, in fact, like, wherein, yes, I was, in fact, student, in fact, of a college at that age. In fact, like, I never dreamt, like wherein, I'll be company secretary of a listed company in Chennai itself, where I had my education. And then, like, today, in fact, of an IT company, of a listed company, I'm the secretary. And then definitely, yes. In fact, I take pride. In fact, like, wherein, I am being differentiated from others. In fact, others are also employees of the company. But when it comes to me, when, in fact, I tell my name, like, wherein I am the secretary of a listed company, I take pride in saying so, because I am a professional. In fact, I need to bring in that professionalism into the organization. In fact, the various compliance with laws and so on. What happens, like wherein, in fact, like, let me just give you a brief difference. Many do ask me these questions, like wherein, who is a CFO, who is a company secretary, who is a practicing chartered accountant, who is a practicing company secretary, and so on. In fact, I'll just touch upon that. In fact, like, maybe not, let me not dwell upon that in detail, like wherein, one thing is, sorry, in fact, like, no, I don't have anything against a chartered accountant, but then to be the CFO, the chief financial officer of a company, or to be the manager finance or a general manager finance of a company, anybody can be. In fact, like, wherein, anybody can be. In fact, that is what many of them, they aren't aware. In fact, if you ask me, in fact, like, Bhagyalakshmi can be the this one CFO or the manager finance, or this one of a any company. In fact, like, absolutely no qualification is required. That's what I said. In fact, my this one, in fact, to the chartered accountants, nothing against you people. In fact, like, and then cost accountants, in fact, they are mostly into, there are certain companies wherein, central governments lay down, in fact, like, where you are mandated to have a cost audit done and so on. And that is where, the cost accountants do come. And then, like, whether if you are, I don't think, in fact, like, you can find many of them, like wherein, like a practicing company secretary or a practicing chartered accountant being a practicing cost accountant. The percentage wise, it's quite less, but then there are there, in fact, like, not many. And but what happens when it comes to being company secretary of a company? Let me give you some examples here, like wherein, to be the company secretary of a company, one needs to be a qualified company secretary. But a qualified company secretary need not be a member. I'll give you the instances, like, my daughter may pass out at the age of 20, in fact, like, somewhere in 2022 or 23, but then she cannot be company secretary of a company. Why, if you ask me, in fact, like, one needs to be a member. Who is a member again, like wherein, that ACS, like you have for ACA or ACMA, one needs to be an associate member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. How do you acquire that membership? CA is a whole-time course. Since you do your articles with a practicing chartered accountant, there are some changes which have undergone there also, but then finally you will have to do your articles with a practicing chartered accountant, and then once you pass out there are some training requirements. You become in fact like an associate member of the institute. Whereas in this case, both in the case of CMA as well as CS institutes, what happens is, since it's not a whole time, in fact, like you can study. In fact, you can study and then you can do CS. In fact, if you want to enter CS profession at an young age, I have given you that this one, like wherein if you have passed your +2, you can write your CSET exam, which is a multiple choice question exam, which is conducted once in 2 months, and then you get your results, and then you can directly join the executive or the intermediate course, like wherein there are timelines. If you do it before February, that same December you are eligible. If you are doing it before August, the next this one June you are eligible. So here what I said is, if I need to be a company secretary, I need to be a member. And what happens, like where every year there is some fees which we need to pay to the institute to have your name on the register of members, like that, like wherein you can, after this session, you can go and check out on all the three institutes. If you want to know Naresh, like wherein whether he is a company secretary or whether he is working for intellect design and so on, you can just log into that institute's website, icsa.edu, and you can very well go and search a member. And then if you know the name, you can search out for using the name. If you know where somebody is employed, then to find out who is the company secretary of a particular company, also you can do it. If you know their membership number, through that also there are various options. So this is what, in fact, like which we didn't have those days, and now with the advent of technology and so on, each institute has got its own website. Like your college or anybody, in fact, nowadays they have got their website. In fact, wherein you can do your online application. As Bhagilakshmi started to become a member, also you can do it online and so on, like that. Now registration of to all these courses also can be done online, sitting at home. Let me just go to my this one, like in 87, when I had gone to the institute, like I wanted to become, join this course and all. They used to give me a prospectus those days, in fact, costing about 100 or so, which will have the application form at the end. I need to pull out, I need to use various hard copies of that, go and submit it to the institute using a demand draft and so on. And then they will give me study materials which I'll have to carry it home, like wherein about 8 materials or 12 materials and so on. Now how it is happening, you do it online, the study materials come to you from either Gurgaon, Delhi, or from Kolkata, in fact through courier. In fact, like see, we have moved very fast, in fact, let me tell you. And this curriculum in all the three, like wherein income tax act, what happens is, like in fact, like did you go see the budget? In fact, speech of the finance minister, Mrs. Nirmala Sitaraman, last week. What happens is, like you have a finance act, 9, wherein it gets the implementation of that act. Once it gets passed through both the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha, it becomes a the bill becomes an act, and then that finance act 9 at this 2022, in fact it's effective from 1st of April 2022, and it is this one for the financial year 22-23. And that only takes into account, like where what is going to be your income tax slabs. In fact, the provisions are, because every year since it undergoes a change, the syllabus here is also, like where once you join, you are given the syllabus for that particular year. In fact, like wherein in the case of income tax, or in the case of in a companies act and so on. But then the act do keep on changing, and then, like we do make fun. In fact, like it's just for fun sake. Whenever we meet in practical circles and so on, what we are allowed to do is, we'll have to engage somebody, wherein every morning they will have to log in into the system, get into the Google, to see that whether any of the provisions, there are circulars, whether there are any amendments to the section. Because nowadays, in the corporate world, and that too mainly in India, day to day the act keeps on changing. And added to that, earlier under the Companies Act, it was only sections, But now what has happened is earlier Companies Act had about 658 sections and so on. But then when it came to this Companies Act 2013, added to that you have rules. So you'll have to read the provisions of the section along with the rules. In fact, and then the rules keep on changing. So it is that like wherein a professional, in fact, as a professional at the end of the day, you might have worked hard, but then you need to be more smarter also, like wherein. So responsibility I have given you. Then certain companies having threshold limits of paid up share capital are mandated to appoint a full-time CS, unleashing into an unknown jurisdiction with now IBC, that is that insolvency bankruptcy code, the RERA, and so on. The areas of this one, our exposure also is getting, in fact, wherein you have got export career aspirations, like wherein education, interest, values, skills, your vision, and the goals. That is what you need to have it in your roadmap. Like the corporate world rewards who strive for excellence, and then some of the traits are you of leadership, responsibility, and confidence to become aware of your strengths, raising one standard all time, brand yourself to be a consistent performer. What is happening nowadays is like very in the old era, if you had asked, somebody has become GM, somebody has become vice president. No, Bharde, what is that? You have become a vice president. Huh? Definitely that person would have crossed 50 or 45. In fact, those were the standards. In fact, in the government, this one, if you see, somebody has become a director or somebody has become a regional director and so on, definitely, definitely there should be 50 plus or 55 plus. But in the corporate world, I have seen CEOs, in fact, at an young age of 25, 30, no boundaries. In fact, it all depends upon the professional qualification you possess. In fact, I am indeed amazed, like wherein, when I see the presentations being made from the B school, like wherein, if somebody has come out, as an MBA graduate from IIM Ahmedabad or IIM Cochin or IIM Kolkata and so on, the kind of presentation they make, the kind of tools they use and so on. So now, like wherein, at an young age, in fact, and to consistently, in fact, to be a performer and so on, you'll have to be really smart, you'll have to be really working very hard, and then to be that. And a professional without facing criticism or challenges cannot accomplish his or her career oriented objective. This needs to be tackled and sought in the best possible way. Some of the challenges: conflict with a colleague, yes; managing a team and creating rapport with your colleagues, constant regulatory updations, as I told you, like in the earlier, you need to have somebody coming and telling you, wherein, what I do is constantly, we are asked to attend PCH program credit hours, like wherein, we have seminars, webinars, and then going on now with it's all webinars. Otherwise, we need to go for study circle meetings on Saturdays or Sundays, wherein we are given, for a 2 hour session, one program credit hour. And then the institute monitors that, like wherein, being a company secretary in employment, I need to do about 35 program credit hours. And then like wherein, now it has been mandated, I need to do 20 program credit hours per financial year. In fact, the regulations have changed there. So it is for the constant updation of the knowledge. A professional, in fact, stands lost if one doesn't keep abreast with the latest developments. The focal point of all relationship is fulfilling each other's expectations. This applies to employer-employee relationships too. When you are recruited into an organization, you are expected to possess certain qualities. There are certain things like a company's culture which changes from one company to another company, but at the end of the day, it's your education, it's your qualification, and things like, wherein, some of the this one, which have been I have collated as open-mindedness, looks for open-mindedness during the course of it. They require to take up new responsibility and challenge, and also expect to have a positive attitude towards any assignment given. In fact, like again coming back to the flexibility demanding, now gone are the days. Now 10 மணி போவோம்ப்பா, 9:30 மணி 10 மணி. By the evening, in fact 5:36, I am out of the organization and so on. Saturdays, Sundays, no disturbance, nothing. Those days we didn't have mobiles, no landlines. In fact, I think people should remember those words like PP, particular person, and so on. So you once you have left the organization, nobody can catch you. But now those days are all gone. Now it is a 24 bar 7. Even on a holiday, even on a vacation, anything, if you have gone on leave also, constantly you are disturbed by the employer, and then there is no shortcut here. It is that corporate world has become like wherein and they find out your reliability without saying expects you to be reliable, not as in serious tasks. Is a win-win situation to both the parties. And nowadays you are not, any employee also getting into an organization, it's not only your remuneration part of it, where you see your whatever is you're going to be your designation, and what is that, like on a long term, in fact, where you are given ESOPs and so on and so forth, to remain, wherein the employers also feel like wherein cost of recruitment is something which you will have to bear in mind, because if they lose some very good employee, it takes additional cost to bring in somebody to replace that particular employee. And then there needs to be a willingness to learn also. In fact, like the corporates are rewarding, and even in today's paper you could have seen like wherein almost all employees are, particularly in the IT sector and so on. In fact, they are given 120% increase, 130% increase, and so on. And you need to be proactive. In fact, like the employers, it's not a tailor-made like wherein I'll be like this. The employers needs to reward me and so on. You need to be self-driven. You need to be proactive. Compared to last generation, no one has the time to teach you or make you to learn the basis or mentor someone at all times. And the proactive state of mind is also a prerequisite. Facts and figures. Employee concern about flexible and remote has increased 18% globally. A recent survey, of 1,950 professions, majority wants flexibility in working hours and creating a work-life balance. Employee expectations are most acute and around the issue of well-being. Overall, employee concern on the issue is increased by 17% across all demographics. It is essential for companies to redefine new metrics for both employers and to assess the pace of work and productivity in a virtual city. And yeah, in fact, like any questions, in fact, I am ready to take. It can be anything. In fact, like it can be general, it can be on the topic, anything. In fact, something to do with my this one also, like personal. This one, how I have gone through this journey of about say 32 years or 32 years since becoming a company secretary and so on. But yeah, in fact, over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for an informative session. It was really enlightening, sir. Now, moving on to the interactive session, we request the participants to post your questions on the chat box. Sir, there is one question.
What are
What
the
are the
statutory
strategies? Yes, sir.
planning in innovation management? First, in fact, like let us talk about the last one. What is innovation management? Nowadays, in fact, like there are no set of any this one like rules or anything like this is how the management needs to be like wherein so strategic planning is like any company. In fact, for example, like wherein they do have a plan. In fact, like what is their business that's going to be hence 3 years or hence 5 years. In fact, like wherein right from starting a company till the company there is nothing like wherein there is an end to a company business. In fact, like it grows. You should have heard about Reliance, you should have heard about the TVS group and so on. Everybody have started a company, by aligning to the latest this one, so on. So strategic planning is in fact like wherein it is only professionals who can do that, like wherein it's not that the others cannot do, but they have a plan. In fact, like they in fact like they do a brainstorming, they do this one, they meet and so on. And then in fact, like innovation management, in fact management needs to take differently. In fact, if everybody starts thinking that the same in fact level and so on, there is no, definitely there needs to be a competition. And how we are going to be in the market, like where in fact you have seen aviation industry, in fact like you have seen the banking industry also, in fact like everybody comes to you, in fact like what is that question everybody asks, like why don't you open an account like with us, and what is that new thing which you are giving, in fact like where everybody say that we give you a personalized checkbook, we give you a personalized debit card, what is so new? But I have seen banks like wherein, in fact, there are certain banks like wherein you go when you're withdrawing from an ATM, like wherein, that innovation comes in. You can specify the denominations, in fact, like, with which you want to draw money. Otherwise, you'll get only 500s and hundreds. No? If you're drawing 10,000, the 9,500 will be only in 500s. The balance 500 only will be in hundreds. But then, in fact, like, there are certain ATMs, of banks which gives you the denomination you want. In fact, like, without a cashier, isn't. So, that innovations needs to come in fact, like, if at all you need to succeed in the corporate world as well as in the businesses, in fact, like, which you are setting up.
Sir, there's one more question, sir.
First of all, Jivita, tell me what is that unstructured time? The time frame you mean? So to answer your question, like wherein nowadays I don't think any employees are given any time, like to come up with creative solutions. The time given is too short, and that is where it increases your stress levels and so on. So to come up with the creative solutions, everything is now on the mail only. Like wherein this is what, see, we do have some campaigns and things like that. In fact, going on, and wherein we are given time, very 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 less time. In fact, like within a week, like a 1 day or 2 days, and that's how in fact like time our employees are given up to come up with creative solutions. Yes, in fact, like we are also constantly asked by our employers, like to come up with creative solutions, because what's the end product we do? In fact, we are a products company, and then our main customers are banks only. So we need to come up with creative solutions, to bring in more customers into our business. So a person, sir, how can 5 M's helps a company like Balaji? Yes, it helps the management, and that is where you are bringing in the professional. Not that everybody is a professional, in fact, like in a company, but then they do help a company, in fact, like in strategic decisions and so on. And that is why no single person can run a company. In fact, at the end of the day, why do you have so many at the senior level? That senior level being assisted by the junior level and so on. In fact, like, so a company, and nowadays running a company is totally different as compared to the earlier ones, like where each one they were following that organizational structure. I need to go to my boss. I cannot go directly to the top man and so on. But nowadays, in fact, like first of all, addressing employees by the sir, this way name, title, and so on. Everything is gone. Nowadays, everybody is by the name and so on, and everybody are given an equal opportunity. Like wherein when it comes to creativity or offering creative solutions. So there, I find like when it comes to a technology company and so on, the youngsters are better placed in offering solutions rather than the senior people, and that's where we have got, as I said, we have got VPs and senior vice presidents at the age of 30 to 35. In fact, like.
Thank you, sir. Over to Kavya for vote of thanks.
Gratitude is a divine emotion. Good evening, this is Kavya, an intern of AMO TNSB. It's my huge privilege to convey vote of thanks to this webinar. I firstly thank Almighty God, whose blessings have led to the successful conclusion of this webinar. I express my wholehearted thanks to our resource person, Mr. V.V. Naresh, for gracing this occasion and educating us. We are grateful for the time and the effort you took to share your thoughts and experience with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank
I extend my wholehearted thanks to Mr. Ramesh Dugar sir, Chairman of AMO TNSB, Dr. Vinod Surana sir, Senior Vice Chairman, Mr. Sudhakar Mukutha sir, General Secretary, Mr. Charles Ratnasamy sir, Executive Director for their constant support throughout this webinar. I also thank Dr. M.K. Malati ma'am, Principal of GSS Jain College for Women, and also a member of AMO TNSB who gave this opportunity to do internship with AMO. Last but not least, I thank all the participants who have joined hands with us. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, sir. The certificate link has been shared in the live chat. We request the participants to use the link to get your certificate.
thank you.
Thank you.